30 minutes. That is the number investigators cannot make sense of, and it is the number this entire update is going to be built around. A dispatch call came in from a private towing company. The boat carrying Nolan's friends was taking on water. That call is on record. What is also on record, through newly released GPS data, is that the boat did not actually leave Horn Island until roughly 30 minutes after that call was made. Sit with that for a second, because it does not fit the timeline that has been repeated publicly for weeks. If the boat was already in trouble, why did it stay docked at the island for another half hour before pulling away without Nolan on it? That is not a rhetorical question. It is the exact question investigators are now trying to answer with hard data instead of second-hand accounts. This case has always been described in emotional terms. A missing teenager, a grieving mother, a community demanding answers. But the actual investigative breakthroughs are not emotional at all. They are technical. They are timestamps, metadata, and dispatch logs. And the biggest one just landed. Over the next several minutes, we are going to walk through exactly what is verified, what is still pending, what has already been proven false once, and what happens next this week. Stay with this one, because the next update after this could be the one that finally answers the question everyone has been asking since July 4th. Let's start at the beginning, because the basic facts of this case matter more now than ever, especially with new data reshaping how those facts line up. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He was a student at Southwest Mississippi Community College and a football player, someone described by people who knew him as easygoing and well-liked. On July 4th, he traveled to Horn Island, a remote barrier island roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, on a boat trip with a group of friends to celebrate the holiday. Horn Island is not a place with hotels or a permanent population. It is a national seashore, popular for day trips, accessible only by boat, and it draws large crowds on a holiday like the 4th of July. At some point that afternoon, the group split up. Nolan was last confirmed seen on the island around 3 in the afternoon, according to information from attorney Ben Crump's office. When the boat left for the mainland later that day, Nolan was not on it. According to Sheriff John Ledbetter, the account from the friends has been that Nolan chose to stay behind and that they left without him. His mother, Christine Wansley, reported him missing that night, right around midnight, which set off a multi-day search involving the Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the National Park Service. 2 days later, on July 6th, his body was found in the water, just off the island, by a National Park Service ranger. Everything after that point is where the case gets complicated, and where the public narrative and the verified record have started to pull apart. Let's move into the first major thread, and it is the one that opened this update: the GPS data. Crime scene investigator Cheryl McCollum has said publicly that it is hard to believe no one on that island saw Nolan again after he separated from his friends, given how many people were reportedly on Horn Island that day. Her point is worth sitting with. This was not an empty stretch of coastline. It was a crowded holiday destination, and yet as of now, no one has come forward with a confirmed sighting of Nolan after that 3 o'clock window. McCollum has also pointed directly to the GPS record as the detail that will ultimately determine whether the accounts given by the 3 boys on the boat hold up under scrutiny. Her reasoning is simple, and it is worth repeating plainly. If their account does not match what the boat's own tracking data shows, they have a serious problem. That is not speculation from a commentator with no stake in the case. That is a trained crime scene investigator explaining exactly what the data is for and exactly how it gets used once cross-referenced against witness statements. Now here is where the timeline actually gets strange. A call was placed to a private towing company reporting that the boat was taking on water. That call is on the record through released dispatch audio. The GPS data shows the boat did not actually leave the island until approximately 30 minutes after that call came in. Think through what that means practically. If a boat is taking on water, the expectation is urgency. Get people off the island. Get the boat moving. Get to safety. Instead, The data shows a full half-hour passed between the report of a problem and the boat's actual departure. 30 minutes is enough time for a decision to be made. It is enough time for a conversation to happen. It is enough time for someone to be looked for, or for a plan to change entirely. Right now, nobody outside the investigation knows what filled that window. That gap, verified by data rather than by memory or by any one person's account, is one of the central open threads in this entire case, and it did not exist as a public detail until very recently. It's also worth noting how investigators are treating this. Sheriff Ledbetter has confirmed that his office has spoken with more than 60 witnesses so far. That is a substantial number for a case involving one remote island on one afternoon, and it tells you something about the scale of the effort happening behind the scenes, even when public updates have felt slow. Let's move to the second major thread, because this is the part of the story that has been the most misunderstood publicly. The FBI's role in this case. For weeks, federal involvement here generated more speculation than clarity. Some people online treated it as proof the case had been secretly escalated into something far larger than a local investigation. Others treated it as evidence of a cover-up, federal agents supposedly managing the story rather than investigating it. Neither of those reads holds up against what has actually been confirmed. Sheriff Ledbetter has been direct about this. He has said the FBI's assistance is not out of the ordinary, specifically because Horn Island sits on federal land, and his office regularly works with federal partners in cases connected to that land. That is a jurisdictional fact, not a sign of some larger hidden case. The FBI has confirmed it is helping examine digital evidence collected so far, which lines up with a normal support role rather than the Bureau taking the case over. But there is a second piece of the FBI's involvement that matters more, and it deserves to be stated clearly. The Bureau confirmed it is working to address interstate threats received by individuals connected to this matter. This is not the same as investigating Nolan's death. This is a separate and serious problem running alongside the death investigation. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, who is the stepmother of one of the 3 teens who was on that boat, has said publicly on Facebook that her family has received death threats. She has said she has come to accept that the truth being established will not necessarily stop the calls from coming in, which is a striking thing for anyone in her position to have to say out loud. Separately, Nolan's friend Trayston Shepard has told ABC News that he and several other friends who were with Nolan on Horn Island have also received threats. He said it plainly. It worries him for his friends. It worries him for his family. Sheriff Ledbetter has confirmed that the 3 friends who were with Nolan on the boat have already been interviewed. That is worth remembering the next time you see a claim online suggesting investigators have not spoken to them or are somehow protecting them from questioning. The record says otherwise. Put together, here is the honest picture of federal involvement in this case. Digital forensics support. Interstate threat response for people who have received death threats because of their connection to a national news story. A working relationship with a local sheriff's office that continues to lead the investigation from start to finish. That is what is confirmed. Nothing more and nothing less. Now to the third thread, and this one requires slowing down and being careful, because it is exactly where misinformation has already caused real damage in this case, twice. Early in this story, a photograph circulated widely online as supposed proof that Nolan was alive after July 4th. That photo was later established, through image metadata, to have actually been taken on June 27th, a full week before Nolan ever set foot on Horn Island. It was wrong, and it spread anyway before anyone caught it. Around the same time, a video circulated that many people believed captured Nolan in an argument shortly before his disappearance. That claim was directly addressed by Trayston Shepard, who stated publicly that the voice in that recording was his own, not Nolan's. Again, wrong, and again, it had already spread widely before the correction caught up to it. Both of those corrections point to the same underlying problem. In the space created by 2 still pending autopsies and an investigation moving more carefully than public demand for answers, Unverified claims have consistently outpaced verified facts. That pattern has not gone away. It is happening again right now, in real time, with the independent autopsy. Several websites have already published detailed claims about what the family's independent autopsy supposedly shows, describing specific injuries, describing toxicology findings, describing a completely revised timeline of Nolan's final hours. Here is the important thing to understand about those claims. None of them are attributed to Ben Crump. None of them are attributed to the family, and none of them are attributed to any named medical examiner or forensic pathologist actually involved in this case. That is not how a real medical finding gets released. A real finding comes from the people who did the exam, presented on the record, not from an unnamed website description. Until Ben Crump or the family says otherwise, treat those claims exactly the way the fake photo and the misattributed video should have been treated from day one. Unverified and likely wrong. That brings us to what is actually confirmed on the medical side of this case, which is far less dramatic, but far more reliable. Following a July 15th meeting between Nolan's parents and District Attorney Angel Morath, Attorney Ben Crump has said publicly that the case will be referred to a grand jury once the underlying investigation concludes. Crump has also said that Nolan's phone, which was found on the boat when his friends returned to shore without him, will go through a coordinated joint review, with the family's independent investigators examining it directly alongside law enforcement, rather than one side reviewing it without the other present. As for the two autopsies themselves, both remain unreleased as of right now. The state autopsy was conducted the Tuesday after Nolan's body was recovered, and its results have not yet been made public. The independent autopsy, arranged by the family and funded in part through Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Foundation, was conducted in Washington, D.C., and its results have also not yet been made public. Crump has explained part of why this has taken as long as it has. He has said it took 6 days for the family to even receive Nolan's body after the state's autopsy was completed, before the independent exam could begin at all. That detail alone accounts for a real chunk of the delay that has frustrated so many people following this case. Christine has also said publicly that when she accessed Nolan's Snapchat account, there were no saved videos and no saved content, despite the platform's standard retention window, and despite Nolan regularly filming when he was out with friends. Whatever that phone does or does not hold is going to matter enormously once both sides sit down for that joint review. Now to the fourth thread, and this is the part of the story that moved from investigation into grief. On July 20th, Nolan Wells was laid to rest. His funeral was held at a church in Ocean Springs, with Reverend Al Sharpton delivering the eulogy, and the service was live-streamed for the large number of people across the country who have followed this case since July. Sharpton made a specific point during his remarks, noting that the crowd in attendance was multiracial and multi-generational. He said, in substance, that not all white people are racist, and not all black people are angry, and that somewhere in the middle is where people need to meet in order to find what is just and fair. He used that moment to call for a full and thorough investigation, while also asking the room to simply celebrate who Nolan was as a person. Following the eulogy, Ben Crump led the crowd in a chant, "Nolan's life mattered." At the press conference that followed the service, Crump confirmed once again that both autopsy results remain outstanding, and that his team and the family are still waiting on both a full incident report and toxicology findings from the state. A funeral is normally one of the most private moments a family goes through. This one was the opposite of private, watched by strangers who have spent weeks analyzing GPS data and debating witness accounts, now invited to see the human cost sitting underneath all of it. Christine and Elmore Wansley walked into that service carrying every open thread of this case with them. A grand jury referral still waiting in the future, 2 autopsies without results, a phone that has not yet been jointly reviewed, a 30-minute gap in a boat's departure time that nobody has explained. So here is where this case actually stands today, and here is what to watch for next. The GPS data has confirmed a 30-minute gap between a distress call and the boat's actual departure, a detail that did not exist publicly until recently, and one that investigators are now using to test whether the accounts given by the three friends on that boat hold up. The FBI's role remains what it has always been: digital forensics support and interstate threat response, not a takeover of the case, with Sheriff Ledbetter's office continuing to lead every part of the investigation. More than 60 witnesses have been interviewed so far. 2 autopsies remain unreleased, and multiple unverified claims about what the independent autopsy supposedly shows are already circulating and should not be trusted until Ben Crump himself presents actual findings. And that is exactly what is coming next. Ben Crump is expected to present preliminary findings from the independent autopsy this Wednesday at the NOC National Convention in Chicago, alongside Nolan's parents. This has not happened yet as of this update. When it does happen, it will be the first time an actual named medical finding from the family side of this case becomes public record, rather than an anonymous claim on a website with no named source. The core question in this case has not changed since the very beginning. What happened to Nolan Wells in the time between him being last seen on that island around 3 in the afternoon and his body being found in the water 2 days later? For weeks, that question has been answered mostly with assumption, rumor, and in at least 2 cases, content that turned out to be flatly false. What is different now is that real data, GPS records, and dispatch audio has finally entered the picture, and it does not match the version of events that has been repeated for weeks. Whether Wednesday's autopsy findings close that gap or open an entirely new one is something we will not know until Crump actually stands up and says it on the record. When that happens, we will break down every detail the moment it becomes public. Subscribe now so you do not miss it, because based on everything verified so far, this is the update that is likely to change the entire direction of this case.